the 9/30 actual surplus as projected in the previous slide only brings us to a 258 RBC. As Liz mentioned previously, we are required by consent order to get WIC at 300%. So we need an additional 2.8 million in additional capital to get WIC to the 300 RBC. Or 496 at the $20 million surplus, however you want to look at it.
So we get just over 20 million. We're actually at 300% RBC.
You're just shy of it.
Okay.
Just shy of it.
So if we have 2,500.
That's correct. Then we'll be at a 300 RBC as required by the consent order.
Okay.
So my interpretation is that RBC is not a constraint for WIC, meaning that the minimum is a constraint.
Minimum is a constraint. The consent order says it will be at 300 by the end of the year. So this is just giving you a comparative what it would take to get 300 at 9/30.
I see. Is the RBC requirement a requirement at quarter end or at year end only?
For the consent order that was signed early last year, it's by the end of the year. For WIC specifically.
So it's conceivable that we put no capital into WIC and that the capital drops to 17.6 as of September. We would be at 258. USAA may blanch a little bit. But that is a possibility.
And that's still a long way from the 200% we committed to the OIR that we would stay
right.
above.
The other thing is you could just file the financial statements at the 17.6 and go about putting capital in, knowing that with the XOL penalty that we would need it in October and November, December. And so you just, rather than do a fire drill in the next week, you could just kind of commit to putting the money in or decide to put the money in or not commit or whatever. And then when the money goes in the, say, October 10th, to pick a date, to the extent that USAA has an objection, it's just, we didn't do a SAP 72. We just put it in after the end of the quarter. That sort of thing.
Actually, Liz, I have a different recommendation that I'll expose now and then we can follow up on it. I recommend that instead we take a scenario that takes us out to the point where the company in its forecasts generates positive earnings, which is right now the third quarter of next year. So it covers the next 3 quarters. An amount that keeps the company in line over those 3 quarters so that prospectively it would not need any other capital contributions. That would clearly satisfy the September constraint.
Yeah.
And if there are no more large storms, it would clearly deal with the year-end constraint. And then we just have the sheer number of severe convective storms in the first half that will determine whether that is sufficient or excess or needs to be topped up. The reason for that is, first of all, I think the amount is manageable. I think it's potentially between 20 and 30 million. And second, because I think that concern about the situation at Southern Fidelity will cause regulators and Demotech to want to see the company capitalized through to profitability and not reliant on a stream of additional contributions.
Okay, so Mike, that is actually a very good proposal. But can we kind of go through a few more numbers and come to that number? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just so Adam and Michael understand the backdrop is we're dealing with a situation now where in Southern Fidelity's case, reaching that point, as far as we could tell, required about $120 million. And the potential profit stream past it didn't warrant it. The difference, Weston's Florida business is wind only and is not attacked as much by attritional. The Texas business is not good, but we are embarking on a cleanup plan. So seeing to the other side of the chasm in Weston is visible. The other side of the chasm, and Ben Carter, who is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best GCs in the world, so I don't want any disrespect from this. But in Southern Fidelity, the further edge of the canyon was receding in front of us, all of us, including management, much to all of our dismay.
Wow.
So we've had to stop additional contributions, but that will make, I think, audiences unhappy to rely on those.
So I'm just going to jump in and remind everybody that what's discussed in this meeting is confidential, that some of this information is not public, and so you got to keep it under your hat.
Of course, you certainly can't trade on it though, but it's absolutely confidential.
Sorry, Michael, did you have a question?
No, I said you certainly can't trade on it, but it is absolutely confidential. You meant Michael Watson, I think.
I did. Sorry.
No, I was thanking Michael for sharing obviously very unfortunate information with us, but it helps with the context. And, I know we need to go through some more numbers, Liz, but I think if we are able to inject additional capital that sees us through a rather longer period as opposed to quarter by quarter, I think that's obviously very welcome. And I don't know whether it is possible to do it prior to the end of this quarter, but, always a little bit nervous about USAA's reaction, on whom we're quite significantly dependent, and also perhaps general unpredictability of Dematec. If we are able to get to 20 million, that could be helpful.
Yes.
So I apologize that we lost connection for a minute there, so we actually did not hear much of anything of what you were speaking to. So
just as well.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but
just as well, because it's all confidential, Deanne. So therefore, you can't divulge confidential information that you haven't heard.
Exactly. So, but I don't want you to expect that we do know what you said. So
yeah, I'll brief you later if it doesn't come up again. Okay, so can we move on to the RBC for WSIC?
Okay, for the WSIC RBC estimate, the actual surplus as projected in the previous slide would only bring us to a 247% RBC. The RBC at a $10 million surplus would still only bring us to a 357 RBC, where the requirement of a consent order is 400% for WSIC. So we would need an additional contribution of $1.2 million to get WSIC back up to the required 400%. And that 400% is expected to be maintained at all times and not just at year end.
And one of the things that I confirmed with Rachel is that, if WSIC needs this extra $1.5 million, that number flows directly into WIC's surplus. So it reduces the amount of money that actually has to go directly into WIC by the $1.2 million.
And the other thing, Liz, another question for Rachel, is the RBC calculation driven by premium volume in Texas or by PML?
I'm missing the answer to that.
I think it's driven by PML. I think it's driven by PML. So
the 31 million gets PML. There's no excessive growth charge.
No, the difference is, Edward, is that the change in the reinsurance means that WSIC now keeps 20% of its cat exposure, where before it ceded 100% of its cat exposure through to WIC.
Got
So
it.
it's just